Hello, everyone. Today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating psychological phenomena that shapes how we think, perceive the world, and make decisions. We're exploring confirmation bias, a cognitive quirk that's been influencing human behavior since the dawn of our species and continues to impact our lives in ways we rarely recognize. I want you to imagine for a moment that your brain is like a sophisticated filtering system, but instead of purifying water or air, it's filtering information, and not always in the most objective way. Confirmation bias is essentially your brain's secret mechanism for protecting your existing beliefs, ensuring that you primarily see, hear, and remember information that aligns with what you already think is true. It's like having a personal assistant whose primary job is to make sure you're always right, even when you're not. Let me explain what confirmation bias really means. At its core, confirmation bias describes our underlying tendency to notice, focus on, and give greater credence to evidence that fits with our existing beliefs. It's not a deliberate choice we make, but an unconscious cognitive process that happens so quickly we're often unaware it's occurring. You see, our brains are constantly bombarded with massive amounts of information every single second. Processing every single piece of data objectively would be exhausting and incredibly time-consuming. So, our brain has developed shortcuts, what psychologists call heuristics, to help us make sense of the world more efficiently. Confirmation bias is one of these shortcuts. Let me share a real-world example with you. Imagine Jane, a coffee shop manager who strongly believes that hard work equals success. When her coffee shop experiences a slump in sales, instead of objectively analyzing all potential reasons, her confirmation bias leads her to immediately conclude that her staff isn't working hard enough. She implements stricter work policies, hires more staff, and essentially wastes resources addressing the wrong problem. In reality, a consultation with other business owners reveals that the shop's new, less visible location is the primary cause of the sales decline. But Jane's belief system prevented her from seeing this obvious explanation. Her confirmation bias acted like a pair of blinders, narrowing her perspective and leading her to make ineffective decisions. This isn't just about individual choices. Confirmation bias plays out on much larger scales. In politics, media, scientific research, and virtually every domain of human interaction. Now, you might be wondering why our brain does this. Why have we evolved to potentially mislead ourselves? The answer lies in our evolutionary history. Our ancestors needed to make quick decisions to survive. In high-stakes situations like hunting or avoiding predators, taking mental shortcuts could mean the difference between life and death. A hunter who spent too much time objectively analyzing every detail might not react quickly enough to escape a charging animal. In modern times, these survival mechanisms manifest quite differently. When we encounter information that threatens our deeply held beliefs, our brain experiences it almost like a physical threat. Challenging our beliefs can trigger the same fight-or-flight response that our ancestors experienced when facing actual physical danger. It's uncomfortable, and our brain's natural response is to protect us from this discomfort. You see, psychologically, being proven wrong feels terrible. It challenges our sense of self, our intelligence, and our understanding of the world. No one enjoys feeling like they've been mistaken, especially about something they care deeply about. So, our brain has developed this ingenious defense mechanism, confirmation bias. By selectively focusing on information that supports our existing beliefs, we maintain our sense of certainty and self-worth. Let me break down how confirmation bias actually works in practice. There are several key processes happening simultaneously. First, there's selective exposure, where we actively avoid information that might challenge our beliefs. Then comes selective perception, where even when confronted with contradictory information, we somehow manipulate or interpret it to still align with our existing views. And finally, there's selective retention, where we're more likely to remember information that confirms what we already believe. Now, here's where things get really interesting. The internet and modern technology have amplified confirmation bias in fascinating and sometimes dangerous ways. The concept of the filter bubble, coined by internet activist Eli Pariser, describes how digital algorithms increasingly show us content that matches our existing preferences. Social media platforms and search engines use sophisticated algorithms that predict and serve content they believe we want to see. Let me share a fascinating example that Pariser discovered about internet searches during the BP oil spill. Two similar individuals searching for BP saw completely different search results based on their past online behavior. One saw investment information, while the other saw news about the oil spill. If these were their only sources of information, they would form entirely different understandings of the event. This technological amplification of confirmation bias isn't just interesting. It's potentially harmful. In political contexts, filter bubbles can create echo chambers where people are exposed only to information that reinforces their existing views. This can lead to increased polarization, reduced empathy, and a breakdown of constructive dialogue. You might think scientists and researchers would be immune to confirmation bias, but they're not. In fact, the scientific method was specifically developed as a way to counteract our natural cognitive biases. Peer review, double-blind studies, and rigorous experimental designs are all mechanisms created to minimize the impact of individual biases on research outcomes. Let me tell you about a fascinating study from Stanford University in 1979 that perfectly illustrates how deep-seated confirmation bias can be. Researchers presented undergraduate students with two fictional studies about capital punishment, one suggesting it deters crime, the other arguing it has no significant effect. Despite the studies being entirely fabricated and designed to be equally compelling, participants interpreted the data based on their pre-existing beliefs. Let me explain how this phenomenon extends into our personal relationships and professional environments. In workplace settings, confirmation bias can lead to something called groupthink, a situation where the desire for harmony and conformity results in dysfunctional decision-making. Think about an employee who might hesitate to share a revolutionary idea for fear of disrupting the group's existing beliefs or direction. So how can we combat this inherent cognitive bias? Well, awareness is the first and most crucial step. By understanding that confirmation bias exists and recognizing its subtle mechanisms, we can start to intentionally challenge our own thinking. I want to share some practical strategies with you. One powerful approach is actively seeking out diverse perspectives, especially from sources that challenge our existing beliefs. Now, this doesn't mean accepting every alternative viewpoint as truth, but rather approaching information with genuine curiosity and openness. We need to engage in constructive debates, listen to understand rather than to respond, and be willing to change our mind when presented with compelling evidence. There's also a fascinating technique that psychologists call exploratory thought, a mode of thinking that considers multiple viewpoints before settling on a conclusion. Instead of immediately trying to rationalize your existing beliefs, take time to genuinely explore different interpretations and possibilities. When you're making important decisions, intentionally look for information that contradicts your initial hypothesis. If you're considering a major purchase, a career change, or any significant life decision, actively seek out perspectives that challenge your initial thinking. This isn't about becoming paralyzed by indecision, but rather ensuring you're making a well-rounded, informed choice. Now, it's crucial to understand something important. Confirmation bias isn't something we can completely eliminate. It's a fundamental aspect of human cognitive processing. Our goal isn't perfect objectivity, which is impossible, but rather continuous improvement in how we think and process information. Looking to the future, technology and artificial intelligence present both challenges and opportunities in addressing confirmation bias. While algorithms can currently amplify our biases, future AI developments might help us recognize and mitigate these cognitive blind spots. Imagine AI tools specifically designed to highlight our potential biases and present balanced, multi-perspective information. In education, teaching critical thinking skills from an early age can help future generations become more aware of cognitive biases. By encouraging students to question their assumptions, seek diverse sources, and approach information with healthy skepticism, we can start to counteract the natural tendency towards confirmation bias. For individuals, developing what we call a growth mindset is crucial. This means viewing beliefs not as fixed, immutable truths, but as hypotheses always open to revision based on new evidence. It requires intellectual humility, the ability to acknowledge that we might be wrong and that our current understanding is always incomplete. Here's something interesting. Confirmation bias isn't always negative. In some contexts, it can provide a sense of stability and confidence. Our beliefs, after all, help us navigate a complex world. The key is maintaining a balance between holding our beliefs confidently and remaining open to refinement and change. Understanding confirmation bias is more than just an intellectual exercise. It's a pathway to more nuanced thinking, better decision-making, and ultimately, a more empathetic and open-minded approach to the world around us. By recognizing how our brains naturally process information, we can start to transcend these limitations and grow. Remember, the goal isn't to become perfectly objective. That's impossible. The goal is to be curious, humble, and always willing to learn. Challenge your own beliefs, seek out diverse perspectives, and approach information with an open mind. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of one of the most fascinating aspects of human psychology. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. Let's continue learning and growing together.